What is going on, everyone? Today we're going to be talking markets. My name is Trevor. I'm here with Brian. How you doing, Brian?
Great, great, Trevor. Looking forward to talking markets with you.
Awesome. So let's just go over some of the macro headlines of the day, and then Brian, you'll give us your sentiment on sentiment and what's been happening. So first things first, I wanted to talk about was there are recession fears. Uh, Today was one of the worst days for the European stock market. This was mostly brought by the possibility that the European Central Bank might increase rate points as well, as most are fearing that they're going to be hawkish moving forward. Now, the US is also not out of the woods entirely, as the Dow falls 300 points on fears that the Fed will over tighten. So the Dow lost close to 300 points today, basically erasing all of its January gains. So this was also big news today. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about was the debt limit. Now, Janet Yellen says Treasury is taking extraordinary measures to avoid default as U.S. hits debt limit. Now, what they're trying to do is basically pass a bill to lift the country's $31.4 trillion debt limit. Now, if we just take a look here, we can see that the current US debt is at $29 trillion. And, it's kind of interesting to see too. You can see here back in the 80s is really when things started to really pick up. And then it kind of tapered off really at the late 90s and then bringing back up again since 2008, really starting to go up again. And so, it's definitely just crazy to see that this is at 29 trillion and they are trying to increase the limit that it's been capped at recently. So just another big thing. Now, speaking about next news is that the National Australian Bank basically announced that it will soon launch a new stablecoin backed on the Australian dollar on Ethereum and Algorand. So, Brian, we might be seeing more sentiment in the future on these two when it comes to this, as this was big news definitely for the day in relations to cryptocurrency. Now, Brian, can you give us some of your insight about what's been happening on your end, and maybe you can show us the different correlations with possibly the S&P 500 and crypto, and just show us your analysis.
Yeah, absolutely, Trevor. It's been a optimistic week, obviously. At the end of last week, we had that big surge here where we saw, prices go from about 18K, a little below 18K on Bitcoin, to just about a day later, it was nearing 22 at one point. Ended up getting maybe 21.4 or so here on the 18th before we saw this minor correction in the last couple of days. It hasn't been much of a correction though, and as you mentioned, the S&P 500 compared to Bitcoin and Ethereum right now, it's starting to correct a little bit, or at least it's gone down the last couple of days. But in bright green here, we see that Bitcoin didn't have near the same drop. And that is a good sign, right? We want to see in crypto uh, a very separate performance between its price performance and the S&P 500 and world markets, because almost all bull markets over the course of crypto's 14 plus year history have happened when there is almost zero correlation between equities and crypto. When they are positively correlated, which they have been for the last year or so, we tend to see mostly downswings for crypto, or at least very unpredictable markets. When they are inversely related, everyone thinks they should be inversely related because crypto's going this way and the banks are going this way, and they should both, any sign of fiat money going down and crypto going up, that's ideal for crypto. Not always the case. We'd rather them just not care what the other is doing. And right now, it's actually starting to look like that's the case. We first kind of saw hints of it right around the time that the FTX implosion happened. And you can see that crypto just took a huge nosedive for obvious reasons, but the S&P 500 went the other direction and began climbing. And it actually reached like a 3-month high at that point. And then they kind of started to click into the same pattern here once again. But I'm watching today and obviously tomorrow as well as the week closes to see if the S&P 500 and crypto continue to move in their own directions, which would imply that the correlation that we've seen over the past year is finally starting to dissipate a little bit. And of course, we see gold going just nuts as well at about a 6 month high right now. Keep an eye on that too, because gold still has a relationship with crypto as well. Many people have referred to crypto as kind of the digital gold. And many think there's a place for both, but some think that one or the other will come out on top at some point in the distant future. So that's what we're
Yeah,
seeing. Yeah, go ahead, Trevor.
I think I think most, including myself, figured that Bitcoin would actually correct and go back down after the recent climb that we had. Do you think Bitcoin is in a consolidation period right now?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. It's the $1 million question, really. We're all trying to figure out whether this rebound actually was real, or whether it's kind of a bull trap to get people interested in the markets once again. We can see from the sentiment side of things, if I head down to our weighted social sentiment metric, which measures the social volume of Bitcoin multiplied by the ratio of positive versus negative comments, this is actually the second most positive week that we have seen over the past year. The only other time was here on the week of July 7th or so, July 6th. And that was kind of around near bottom where a lot of people were starting to hear that the Fed is going to start easing inflation, which of course they didn't. They continued their interest rate hikes for another couple of months, but that was the only other time we saw positivity this high. If we go back 2 years, you can see the euphoric sentiment that was happening around the all-time highs here, around October, November 2021. Typically, you don't want to see that. You don't want to see everyone thinking it's time to buy the dip, because then you see a further dip until people get negative. And you also don't want to see everyone thinking crypto is going to go up forever, we're mooning, everyone's going to get their Lambos. That tends to be when corrections happen. So right now, this is not ideal. We don't want to see this many people optimistic and euphoric about crypto just because of a relatively mild rebound that we've seen. This is really just the same market cap that was lost during the FTX implosion. So now we're kind of back where we started, and everyone's acting like it's the beginning of the next bull run. I shouldn't say everyone, but many people have gotten perhaps a little overly excited, and we need that excitement to cool down a little bit in order for a real bull run to start. Typically, bull runs start when people don't expect it, not when everyone sees a teaser for it and says, all right, let's all jump back in. That might prop prices up very temporarily, but nothing that will lead to an elongated price run up. And we can
Yeah,
also
it's
see,
definitely interesting to see how, sentiment can just reverse very quickly,
oh yeah, all it takes is a little bit of a tick up right now, because people have been pounded into the ground over the past year with the way prices have been moving. So something tiny can end up opening the floodgates in terms of people's optimism again. But we can also see that in terms of where people are putting their money where their mouth is right now, things have kind of flattened out. If we looked at this 2 weeks ago, the amount of green bars here was about 10 times as much as it is now. Lots of people shorting, people expecting prices to go down, and that ultimately, those shorts ended up acting as rocket fuel for prices to begin to rise. And those liquidations allowed prices to move up more than they otherwise would have in a neutral perpetual contract funding rate market. So now we're sitting at, mostly neutral funding rates here. People are just sitting on the sidelines, not sure which direction things are going to go next. There's still a little bit of shorting for a few assets like Engine, Hedera Hashgraph, Helium, and Monero among some of the top assets. You can also
Is
see
Engine the most shorted right now?
among the top 100 or so assets that we have funding rate data on, yeah. And it's mostly due to the fact that it really has decoupled ahead of the markets. You can see right here over the past 2 days, it's up 14%, which is the second highest among these, I think, other than Serum. Oh no, not Serum is only so they've just started a rebound over the last 8 hours. 8 hours. So yeah, Engine is the highest performing asset that we have funding rate data on amongst the top 100 or so, 150 assets. So that's probably the main reason people are just expecting it to cool down due to just returning to the mean.
When you usually see a coin starting to pump, above 5%, do you typically see that there are a lot of short sellers and that they're expecting a correction?
I wouldn't say
Typically, probably, right?
typically. I would say it depends
No.
on how isolated that pump is. Like if all of the markets are up, 2% and one is going up 5 to 10%, uh, it might be a little limited on how much people are going to care because it's so short term. But if prices market wide are kind of moving down, but this one asset is going up, 10, 20% or so, then people start to really pay attention and go, all right, this is where everyone's going to try to jump in and probably get fooled and get pumped and dumped. So I'm going to bet against the price and assume that the newbies who are trying to jump in on the pump and up coin are going to get screwed on this asset. And oftentimes that's when you start seeing a bunch of isolated shorts like we're seeing right now.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, I think overall we're kind of in a ranging period. My personal theory is we stay ranging for a little while as altcoins kind of dance around. Half of them go up, half of them go down, and they kind of take turns going through small efforts to pump. Uh, but until Bitcoin and Ethereum really start to gain steam more consistently, we see BTC going toward 25K or Ethereum start to go toward 1700 and above. Uh, Altcoins are going to have a hard time continuing to push above the two top assets in crypto because they need those market caps to pump first and foremost, usually in order for the profits to start trickling down into the large and mid and small market cap altcoins.
Yeah, so typically Bitcoin would usually be the first pump when we're taking a look at the bull market. Now, with this pump that's recently happened, is Bitcoin leading the way in that, or you
No, no,
you're
they're
really not
definitely
seeing?
not. That's what was interesting about this pump.
Yeah.
We we definitely saw that. Let me see if I can bring up a price comparison really quick. We saw that the the altcoin pack was pumping way ahead of Bitcoin over the first couple weeks of 2022, and that was a concern because we definitely saw that uh, Bitcoin hadn't had an organic pump on its own in order to justify that other altcoins would have an elongated push themselves. It doesn't mean they can't continue for a little while longer, but given enough time, it's pretty hard to justify that a big run can happen until we start seeing Bitcoin, go on a bit of a push on its own without altcoins going ahead of them. It's typically the other way around when it comes to bull markets. I'm trying to show just like a 1 month sample size. It's tough because they start at different lows and highs here. But like if we just take a look at, I'm just taking two of the largest assets besides Bitcoin. Bitcoin's
Mhm.
up 24% in the past month, Ethereum 30%, XRP 14%. Then we have, I don't know, Uniswap. Yeah, 14%. I think it's like half and half. There were a lot of altcoins that just went nuts, like Mana, for example.
Or Lido.
Yep, Lido's been really, really pumping like crazy. You can see Mana here up about 2x just over the past month. And there were a lot of these. I just don't want to go through each one of them, but
Yeah.
a lot of these mid and small market cap assets really just took off and kind of made up for the lost time that they were hammered in the second half of 2022. So I think it would be great to start seeing that Bitcoin goes on a little bit of a mini push on its own, and then you'll more organically start to expect that it trickles into the altcoins that a lot of people are waiting on.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and also let us know where you guys think the markets are going to go.
Yeah, great catching up with you as always, Trevor. Looking forward to it next week.
Awesome. Take care, guys.